The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us on this webinar for solution selling. We're excited to spend time on this topic, and thank you for your questions when you registered. Should you have any questions during the webinar, time permitting, we will get to those during the end of the webinar during a Q&A session. You can submit those into the questions tab on your control panel. For APMP members, just a reminder, this webinar applies toward your continuing education units for your certification. Slides and the presentation will be on our website by tomorrow. Also, there is a handout with a scorecard in the handout section of your navigation panel. I am Mallory Price, and I will monitor this webinar. Today, we have 3 experts who are practitioners in business winning. Combined, they have over 50 years experience in sales, business development, capture, leadership, and proposal development. Amy McGee joins us from Texas. Amy is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Solutions at Shipley. She is former president of APMP International, has held many proposal management positions, owned and managed her own consulting business, and led a nonprofit organization for many years. Sam Singh is managing partner of Shipley Limited, overseeing Shipley India and many global client engagements. Sam is a practitioner and an innovator in sales leadership, capture management, and proposal development. He is also a certified and sought-after trainer for a comprehensive sales performance curriculum and solution set. Brad Douglas is Executive Vice President of Shipley's Global Services, and Brad will moderate today's webinar. So thank you all for joining us, and Brad, I will pass the mic to you.
Okay, thank you, Mallory and Sam and Amy and all of you who have taken time today to join. This is a topic we really enjoy. It's a topic that has been requested multiple times, and we hope to be able to share some good ideas that you can maybe implement or take to your organization or apply personally in your role, whatever your role might be. But again, thank you for joining and spending time with us. These are the 4 areas we want to cover today. What are some of the competitive environmental issues and trends going on around us? We'll talk about what core solution selling skills are and what some of the core competencies are. We're going to talk about customer engagement, which is such an important part of being solution providers and problem solvers, and not just sellers. And toward the end, and with the handout you have that you can download, we'll walk through quickly a solution selling scorecard that can be really helpful. So many of you are familiar with Shipley's term or industry's term, probability of win. Well, this scorecard is similar to that in that it helps show us where we are making progress in advancing the opportunity and the pursuit. So we thought we'd start off with what are some of the common myths around sales and selling. Many of us are working in business to government type environments and situations. Others of us are working in business to business type selling. And a lot of us are engaged in international opportunities and pursuits. So let's just address a few of the common myths that we hear and you probably experience in your organizations as well. So Sam, I'm going to ask you if you'd maybe walk through these, and then Amy, wondering if you would add any common myths that you've seen and heard and run into out there in industry. Sam?
Yeah. So one of the common myths I hear is that, selling is somebody else's business. Why would I need to worry about selling? And I would say, when we think about selling really is everybody's job. Everybody is in sales. And what I would suggest is, selling is too important to leave to just the core sales team. And many think that, Our solution's so good. We're industry leaders. How many times have we reviewed proposals that say, we are the leading technology company, or we're the leading company, so we don't need to sell at all. The other interesting thing is, does anybody want to be sold to? So what do we need to do in order to help people buy? And many think that you need to have the gift of the gab, as they say. You've got to be a smooth talker. I remember somebody saying, how do you know a salesperson is somebody's a salesperson? You've got to count your fingers after you shook hands with them. Well, those are not the type of sales we're talking about. We really need to learn to become professional salespeople.
Yeah, good point. You're not everyone's born with that skill or competency. But Amy, are there any other myths that you've, in your professional experience, run into out there?
Yeah, I think two others. One myth is, that selling is undignified. And I think that's not true. I think if you think of selling just as purely transactional, that might be why that myth prevails. But really, if we think of we have a service or a product that helps someone, that's actually not undignified at all. That's something very worthwhile. And then I think the other is that extroverts are the best salespeople. And while it might be true that those of us who are extroverts are very comfortable talking with people or talking with our prospects, the reality is some of the most successful salespeople are those that are really focused on being helpful, which requires that they're to be good listening, good at listening, good at synthesizing information. And that's something that a lot of introverts actually excel at.
Good, excellent inputs, and a lot of those on this webinar are likely might be more familiar with capture as a term in industry, and to some extent, capture management, capture planning, and selling they're not synonymous, but they're like two sides of the same coin. Because successful capture managers today have to engage in some of this, what we would have traditionally called sales activity. They have to be a little bit persuasive and things like that. And those are what we'll talk about when we get into the core competencies. But some of you might have been at participating in a virtual conference a few weeks ago put on by APMP, the Association of Proposal Management Professionals. They put on a virtual capture conference. Sam and I presented a similar topic at that conference, and as preparation to that, we actually did a poll. And we asked this question to people who had registered for this conference. Which characteristic would you rate as most important for a capture manager? And these were the responses we got back. Some were surprising, some maybe not. But notice the highest scoring, most important characteristic was the ability to ask good questions and listen. And so that's part of what we're going to focus on in this webinar today. What's a little bit surprising to us is that customer relationships didn't have nearly the responses as we would expect, because we think that's such a vital part of selling, and especially solution selling, when we're actually trying to solve problems and present solutions. So just we're in competitive environments, most of us. We're selling is not easy, and in this environment we're in, this idea of trust, relationship building, and building confidence with our potential customers or clients is so important. So trust is a huge key, because really in industry and business and government, there's a little bit of skepticism out there and some harsh attitudes towards some of our sales and capture professionals and activity. And we need to be aware of that and sensitive of that. The people are a little bit exhausted of being contacted by by salespeople. Changing technology and communication has changed the way we have to try to get people's attention, for example. One of the hardest parts of selling is getting an audience and having someone listen to us. There's a lot more and better information out there today than there was in the past, both on the customer side. They know much more about us than we think they do. And if we're doing our job, we should know a lot more about them. But I want to come back to this idea of trust. So solution selling, the topic of this webinar, uh, remembering that trust is really one of the baseline elements of all of this. So as we talk through what's involved in trying to be a solution provider, let's keep in mind that trust is just a huge important part of that. So a couple of other points. The reality that we're in now, customers are going to buy from people and organizations they trust. Those of you who are trying to pursue government work in the US government, and I assume international government, risk and trust is becoming a bigger and bigger evaluation factor. You know, how much can we trust this vendor or this provider? How much confidence do we have, and how much risk is there involved if we engage with them? Customers buy from people who know their business. Customers want solutions. They're just not after our product or service. They want a complete solution and confidence in what we bring. Again, trust and execution. Suppliers and partners have to sell the way the customer prefers to buy. We need to do our homework and understand what that means. Suppliers and partners who demonstrate solutions and actually prove value have the advantage. And there's one real interesting paradox when we talk about trying to be solution providers and selling solutions instead of just products and services, and like Amy said, commodities. That is that our customer, they want the exact same thing we want. They want to solve the problem. They want the solution to their problem or their mission. What are they trying to accomplish? We want to give it to them. They want it, but sometimes we get in our own way, you know. So why is it so difficult? And Sam, if you don't mind, I'd like you to talk about why is there some of this dysfunction, if you will, or tension between us, a selling organization, trying to provide a product or service, and the customer trying to decide who to go with. Would you walk us through why some of this dysfunction and tension exists in your mind?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, it is a lack of trust. What do we mean by that? Well, you know, we've had a bad experience dealing with this kind of solution providers, and we're not so sure that you're really listening to what we say. So lack of trust comes from really thinking or a view that the seller is not thinking of our benefit, they're really thinking about their benefit. So that's something we see. We may have had a bad experience in terms of selling. The other thing is we're unknown. Would we go and buy a car from a brand we don't know at all? A brand new brand has come out and we don't know, there's no experience. There's nothing that says, you know, what happens there. The other thing we also see is that there is a lack of clarity in the market. So who are this type of solution providers? Who has got a proven track record? And then expectations are not clearly understood. So there is a misalignment of expectations. And then, of course, there's other things like regulation in politics. And something I've seen quite a lot is amongst all of this is a kind of ritual dance. And the ritual dance is we've got to get the best deal. So we need to put out an RFP. We need to put out a tender. Just last night, I was speaking to 3 executives who were going to put out a small tender document for getting sales training. So I asked them, how were they going to evaluate 3 or 4 vendors? and they put a requirements document together. I said, why don't you just ask each one to come and do a half-a-day session on their dime, and you make a decision based on who you see? So we can't do that. We need a formal process. So there is a lot of these kind of customs and ways in which we do things that gets in the way of finding the right solution. And a lot of times it's about, high pressure. A lot of sellers, I haven't reached my quota this month, this quarter. What could I go and sell? Could I try and close it now, this quarter? What would it take to get the deal closed this quarter? Or the seller is unresponsive to needs. How many of us have had call centers calling us and wanting to sell us something, but when we ask them to give an alternate solution, they are not responsive. And many sellers are really pushing a product or a service that will benefit their organization. So these are all things that create a lot of tension between sellers and buyers.
Thanks, Sam. And what's really a challenge for us is some of these tensions or misalignments. They're not our fault. It's the result of what someone else did, or the last vendor or the last contractor that was in there destroyed trust, and there's a bad experience and all of that. But we're left, as maybe the new bidder or proposer, to have to overcome that, the poor performance of someone else. And so again, solution selling is all about understanding these things, understanding where the customer is at the time. Have they just had a bad experience with a provider, a supplier, a vendor? Is there confusion out there in the market? What are there new regulations about what and when to buy and purchase and acquire and spend? So solution selling, the key points here is understanding the environment that we're in, so that we can address it. All right, a couple of core solution selling competencies we need to think about. We have to stay focused on the customer. We have to meet them where they are at, including some of their behavior styles, their patterns, and Sam's going to address that here in a little bit. We need to think more like the customer, the buyer, the stakeholders. What are they worried about? What do they need to accomplish? What's in it for them personally? We need to be good at asking questions and asking good questions, listening actively, balance the internal focus of our company and our organization with our customer-facing tasks. What kind of action plan do we have? And then the all-important building trust. And Amy, I just maybe pause here for a minute. Are there other selling competencies that you think are critical for us to all understand and try to adopt?
Yeah, and Brad, I think like these are all best practices for when we can work with our customers so that we can meet them where they're at. And we often get the question of, well, hey, I'm working on a proposal and I don't have all of these details about the customer. How am I going to demonstrate this, that we have trust? This was kind of outside of my control. And I think there are some things, if you are not in a position, if you're the proposal manager or proposal writer, and you're not in a position to be asking questions of the prospective client and listening to them, I think there are some other things that you can do. You can do some basic research, look at their strategic plans, their annual reports, their websites, the LinkedIn profiles of some of the key executives on their team. See what you can surmise about their priorities, their goals, their plans. Look at the news from reliable sources and see, are you uncovering some pain points that, had you been able to ask some good questions, you feel pretty confident would have come out. And then I think, get creative. If you can't talk to this customer, talk to some of their other customers and find out, what problems prompted them to buy from you in the past? What factored into their decision to work with you? When did they decide that you were the company to go with? So I think that there are some research competencies that even if you're not the point person talking to the customer, you can uncover some things that allow you to demonstrate that you understand the customer in a way that does build trust when you're at a later phase in the proposal process.
Excellent point. And sometimes right within a solicitation document itself, for example, I was working with a client recently, and the tender that they were working from that they had to respond to, right in the introduction of that tender were some really good nuggets of hot button issues and key solution items they were looking for that really didn't appear in the list of requirements, but they were in the introduction to that solicitation. So your comment about research and really fact finding and uncovering everything you can, that is fantastic advice.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's some things sometimes that are right in front of us that we need to pay attention to that might not be the requirements, but we're getting a sense of what's important and what the pain points and issues this customer is dealing with.
Excellent. Good. Okay, well, I would like to just kind of call everyone's attention to this next discussion point because it's kind of at the heart of solution selling and being able to apply and actually try to win more work. These are some critical skills that go with us being better at trying to compete and win work. And so I'm going to ask Sam if he would walk us through these 6 critical skills. And I invite you as webinar participants to think about these skills in your organization and how are you doing at these skills. Those individuals that do have maybe customer interface, how are they stacking up at applying these 6 critical solution selling skills? So Sam, will you walk us through these, please?
Yes, thanks, Brad. There was a time when everyone believed that if you follow a process, step A, step 2, step 3, step 4, step C, you'll win the deal. And the human element was not thought about. So this is a new development in the last few years to bring in the skills of us as sellers. And the first one is presence, really about both the body language, voice, and preparation that helps the seller establish a presence. And not having prepared, we all have been guilty at times flying from the seat of our pants. And this is about saying, I'm going to be ready. This is how I'm going to conduct myself. This is how I'm going to speak. And this is how I'm going to inspire trust. So presence is the starting point. When it comes to relating, is really how easily or how difficult is it to start with acknowledgement and also finding common ground to establish rapport and an empathy to connect. And this is becoming even harder with virtual selling because often the camera is not working, we cannot see the individual, maybe the voice. And so this takes a bit of effort in the virtual selling world to be able to establish common ground very early and keeping our introductions short as a way of getting the buyers to talk. And then in terms of questioning, at what point does questioning start to feel like an interrogation? And really the questioning should be categories of questions that help us to really understand where are they today, where are they heading, who are involved in the decision making, diagnostic questions to drill deeper and find out why is it that they have this problem, explore and see if they have some ideas of solutions. Often we may go to, for example, to a car dealer, and a car dealer might say, she might ask me, well, Sam, what do you want in a car? So that's a way of exploring whether I already got a view towards what solution I'd want to buy, what car I would like to buy. Listening's an interesting one, is really listening both with empathy and with our body language, what we call active listening. And all of this is to combat what I call our phantom competitor. From the moment we wake up, there is a phantom competitor, and those are our mobile devices. And so, do we get distracted when we're listening as to that ping as a message comes through on LinkedIn or somebody sending us a message on WhatsApp? So active listening demonstrates to the person talking from the client organization or the prospect that the most important conversation right now is listening to you and not thinking of the next answer. And then positioning is interesting, is that positioning picks up from questioning and takes a dialogue. For example, can I try something with you? Is a technique to not give a full solution, because often if we say, here's the solution, what you need to solve your problem, we don't have the buy-in. So a buyer or a customer prospect needs to feel that they're involved in developing the solution. So hence we suggest that presenting some ideas and then checking, getting feedback. And this is something we could all improve. Give you an example. I may be going out to play golf every Saturday morning. And in the past, I would never check with my wife if it was still all right. But a few years ago, after I learned this technique, every Saturday I check, is it still okay with you that I go out to play golf? And checking means we're not taking somebody for granted and getting feedback whenever we're having that dialogue with a customer. And increasingly what we're seeing is more and more organizations are placing emphasis on these 6 critical skills so that sellers can interact better, and heading up towards becoming a trusted advisor, gaining trust, is that we need to have these 6 critical skills. There is a 7th skill, which is not listed here, and that's handling objections. For example, if a common objection you hear is your price is too high, how do we acknowledge that neutrally and then turn that into a dialogue? Brad.
Great, Sam. And I think all of us need to do a little checking and see how we're doing on this. Some organizations have been lucky enough over the years to be able to rely on their brand and almost become order takers. And that has shifted. We have to apply these skills. And thank you for going over this. And I think this is just a good area for a checkpoint for all of us. How are we doing in these areas? Are we really listening? So thank you. So let's follow up on that a little bit then, and talk about actual customer engagement and awareness. So how do we become, more aware of customers and where they are in the buying cycle and things like that? So one item, and Sam, I'm going to ask you to just help ground us in this notion of, buyer behavior and where are they at in the buying cycle. Will you walk us through this for a few minutes?
Sure. One of the things we need to think about is that there is a journey, and the journey is not about the buying process. This is really the journey in our mind, how we feel. A plan or latent stage is really, we've got to get around to solving it. Nobody's getting hurt. I'm not in trouble. One way in our personal lives could be, that tire in my car needs attention. But you know what? I could live with it. I could pump up the air every few days. It's not critical. I could live with it. That's the sort of latent stage. And in business, there are sort of next year's plan could be latent, or a plan, or everyone's comfortable living with the problem. They recognize it's a problem, but it's not critical. Now let's take the next one. Imagine if I have to go on a long journey. I've got to drive all the way from Utah to Seattle, and suddenly the tire becomes critical. So I need to think about going and fixing. And if you look at the bottom of the screen there, it says, I admit I have a problem. Now I recognize this is critical. I need to fix the tire. And that's when I start thinking about my needs. Do I buy a Firestone tire? Do I buy a Goodyear? Do I buy Continental? what are the kind of write-ups, and I start determining my needs. Many places there is a mileage, there's sound, there is braking, safety. All of those things go into determining the needs and requirements. And at that time, I have a view that I may have, roughly what I'd have to pay for the type of tire in that category. And I don't think about price, but I then start looking at alternatives. And here's when I look at the alternatives, I'm looking at the solution, the different brands that I talked about. It could also be, I'd look at reviews. What kind of rating have you had for these tires, for example? So I may talk to somebody who's had a similar tire. What do you think? Does that work? And then after I've done that and evaluated options, then I get to evaluating risk. And evaluating risk is really about, which option should I go with? And in business purchases, what we see is that customer often has a view in terms of what they want, what their needs are. I want you to imagine a line going right in the middle of it. And in the past, before the Google days, a prospect would engage a seller right early to help determine needs and requirements. Today, the seller comes in when the solution has already been thought through. So our trick is to get earlier into that journey, help the customer, the prospect, shape their needs. And then when we get to evaluate risk, if you're not the incumbent, one of the risks would be, is it worth it us switching from an incumbent? And we as sellers need to also be a risk manager to understand where are the stakeholders. The other thing we could do on this chart is we could plot where each key stakeholder is in that journey to see whether we could have alignment. And we need to get everyone at the risk to close the deal. If some are at needs, some are at solutions, some are at price, some are at risk, that's not a formula for a successful sale. We need to align them. Now, here's the bad news. That journey is not linear one way. It's a zigzag. Something could happen and two stakeholders could move from evaluate risk right back to determine needs. And if you're doing sales forecast to say, when is this deal coming? This is a great way of looking at where are my stakeholders in this buying behavior journey. And that helps me to see whether this deal is going to come in or not. Later on, we'll talk about a sort of process-based tool that Brad talked about, a strength of sale check method. And everyone has a bias. For example, and you could put this in the chat if chat is alive or in the question. Imagine a rich relative left you the first tranche of $50,000 and more to come, but they said, go and spend this money on having fun. What will you spend that $50,000 on? Almost all of us will have an initial point of view, and then we'll try and defend that point of view. So we have an emotional decision about what we want to buy, and then we use logic to justify it. Back to you, Brad.
Well, that's talking about that as a journey is really interesting, Sam. And I'm sitting here thinking, even in government acquisition, there's a there's a whole lot of, like you said, zigs and zags and budget and approvals and all of that in government, the government journey. But really, it boils down to this very same thing that we're looking at. I mean, the government identifies needs, then they start looking at possible solutions, and that's one of the questions. One of many questions that came in advance of the webinar was, how when we think the customer already has a solution in mind, how can we make a difference? Well, you said it, Sam. We make a difference by understanding more about their perceived perfect solution and then shaping what we can go back and offer so that it is differentiated. It's slightly better than any other offer they're going to get. So thanks for going through that, because it simplified in my mind that even some of the complex scenarios like government, they follow this same journey.
Yeah, if I may interrupt briefly, Brad, if the customer has a view of a solution and it's not our solution, we could very nicely, through the use of questions, inject a bit of fear of missing out. This recently happened to a friend of mine who had decided to buy a car, and he wouldn't look at an alternate brand, but somehow he was persuaded to listen to the seller, and the seller asked the questions. You know, the car you're buying, does it give you this? Does it give you this? Does it give you this? Does it give you that? And suddenly they discovered there were three things in the spec that car was not giving. And that suddenly created this fear of missing out. So that may be something we could think about using our questioning skills to help the customer or prospect revisit the solution. Back to you, Brad.
Great, thank you. Let me pause here, and sorry, Mallory, maybe you were going to ask this as well, but a question that has been raised, and Amy, I'm going to kind of address this to you a little bit, and it's back on a previous slide or two when we were talking about the 6 critical skills. And it kind of goes to your earlier comment. The question was, do we have to, what if we're not hardwired for some of these skills? What if we are just not a born good listener and we're not good at asking? Are some of these skills things that we can learn and be taught? Amy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Definitely. Well, and Brad, you and I work together well, so listening is something I have to remind myself to do regularly because I get enthusiastic and I like to talk. But yeah, I think we're always looking at, like, what are the skills that are teachable and what are the skills that you just have to have? And I think the things that Sam went through on presence and listening and checking and all of those things, I think those are all very teachable skills. So for leaders in our organizations, those are things that we can either provide coaching on or hire coaching for. I think there are lots of books and videos and other things on those topics, and you definitely can learn them. I do think that there are some traits that successful salespeople tend to be naturally hardwired with. Now, there are things you can cultivate, but I think you have to be curious. All of the things that Sam has laid out here about, determining needs and requirements. Are they evaluating alternatives? Other things. I think someone who is very curious and always want to know more and learn about people, learn about products, learn about solutions. I think sales as a career comes a little more naturally to them. This probably makes more intuitive sense to them. I think the great salespeople also have to have drive. They have to be people that really are achievement oriented. So it can be achievement oriented. You have goals you want to accomplish. It could also be mission oriented. People that really like helping people, but you have to have some internal drive that's moving you forward. And then Sam touched on this, but I think you also have to be resilient. You have to be resilient to be able to deal with the unexpected. Like here on this slide, you think that the client is moving neatly from 1 to 2 to 3. Well, it turns out when they get to evaluating alternatives, well, they think of something else and they go back to needs requirements. And you really thought, this was the time I was going to get to make this sale to them. Or you pitch your idea and you get knocked down or you make a mistake. So I think, there are some traits that that if you are hardwired with them, I think sales as a profession might come more naturally to you. But I think all of the things, the critical skills that Sam outlined before, are things that are teachable and are things that people can learn from scratch or can learn and develop over time.
Great input. Good. Thanks for addressing that. And you're right. There's training programs, there's coaching programs. One of the things I've learned over my career is the value of shadowing. And as we're trying to bring along the next generation of capture or sales talent, giving those people who we see as maybe fast trackers or the next generation, giving them chances to shadow those that really know how to do this well. And I think too often we We don't provide mentorship like we should. And in today's environment, sometimes it's tough because there seems to be a lot of turnover. There's a lot of challenging, this fight for talent, competing for good talent. And so mentoring this next generation of business developers, sellers, capture managers is vital, and a combination of learning and training and mentoring and tools it's doable. I agree with you, Amy. It's teachable, but we have to invest in it, and we have to be willing to bring those people along. So this next screen here is just nothing more than to remind all of us that part of selling is making sure we understand who the stakeholders are in the customer organization. And so here's an idea of how to build kind of what we might call a persuasion map. Who in this buying customer organization can be an influencer. And then you'll notice how they're colored boxes. Some of these positions are favorable to us, maybe. Others, the orange, a little less favorable, maybe even unfavorable. They don't like us for whatever reason. And then maybe there's neutral people or people we don't know yet. And so part of our responsibility as solution sellers is to figure this out. Who's who? Who carries the weight? Who are the influencers? And then there's always this, with that in mind, there's always this sale within the sale. Identifying those key stakeholders and decision makers, and maybe even categorizing them into are they the financial buyer? Is that what they care about? Technical buyer, the executive stakeholder, others. And then how do we try to influence and get in touch with? These were several questions came in. How do we do this in such a virtual environment that we're in now? And, don't discount the power of social media and connecting with people. It's important to connect with people, for example, on LinkedIn before you try to sell to them. I get pinged every day. And as someone trying to sell me something on LinkedIn, I don't even know them. I have no relationship with them, no contact with them. Some kind of other introduction from them would be nice. Invite me to a webinar, invite me to a demo, invite me to an event, give me something worthwhile that I care about, then maybe I'll engage with you. But to just start selling on social media, cold selling, cold calling only on social media, it is not the way to go. But contacting, connecting, building networks is absolutely a viable option virtually. And then industry events, professional events are another way. So this journey Sam talked about, it can be looked at in a lot of ways, but a couple of key points here is, Sam mentioned this, buying, even at a personal level, a corporate level, a government level, there's an emotional component to that. So emotions, attitudes, biases, trends, all of those have to be considered along this journey, as Sam mentioned. All right, customer engagement. We kind of tried to, this was, again, you all helped us shape this webinar, and this was part of the questioning, is how do we try to engage? And we think, again, it boils down to really earning the right to be respected and to be trusted as a solution provider. And so customer engagement, we have to plan and develop effective questioning. You notice that was one of the 6 critical skills Sam talked about. We may only get one chance to ask some really good questions. Peeling the onion back, asking follow-up questions, clarifying questions. Those of you selling to the government, you'll notice that usually when you get an RFP, a request for proposal from the government, they often give us a chance to ask clarifying questions. Well, that is a strategic opportunity that too often we discount. that we need to think through and be strategic. And then, as Sam mentioned, listen, clarify, listen for evidence and impact of what they're trying to accomplish. How can we help them? Amy, do you have any other thoughts on this? Is just kind of three basic areas of customer engagement. Any other additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that we've been getting is, tell me about how do I build this trust and these relationships now that we're virtual? Sam mentioned, that can be harder, and it is, because one of the pieces of building trust is having that rapport and connection with someone. And there are just some things that you don't have to plan out as much, maybe if you're in person, like that walk from the front door to your office, how you can kind of chit chat with someone. Well, now via, Zoom and Teams and other things, we all kind of feel this pressure to just jump right in. So I think being a little more intentional and clear in our purpose and intentional in our preparation. So it is planning and developing effective questions that are about business, but also kind of thinking through, are there any rapport questions that feel natural and appropriate to the situation that you can ask as you talk with your potential customers? And then, some very tactical things. If our customers, if we know that they're now in back-to-back meetings, like jumping from one video conference to the next every hour, a couple of things, we can send questions in advance that might feel a little strange, but someone might want to respond via email, or at least they know what's coming. And the other is, just tactically, when you're doing your scheduling, try to not be the fifth, sixth, seventh meeting of the day with someone. I think it's harder to peel that onion if someone is sort of at the end of their bandwidth. So those are just a few other things to think about.
Great, good. Thank you. So many of you have probably seen this concept before, but our goal in solution selling is to get out of this lower box here of the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid where we're just one of many providers or vendors or commodities, and move up to where we really are. We really get to the point where we are a trusted advisor. That's the bottom line. We're trying to be more than just order takers or fulfilling orders. We want to get with our customers, our clients, to where we are that trusted advisor. And one way to do that, and I just echo what Sam said earlier as far as the critical skills, listen more than we talk. We, as sellers, we have a tendency to just want to talk, and divulge everything we know about our product or our service or our company. And it's a hard habit to break. But there's this concept of a curse of knowledge where we're so passionate about our customer or our company, our products, our services, our key personnel, our technology, that it becomes a curse. It becomes a curse to have all that and want to just talk about it instead of asking good questions, listening, responding, and what we call peel the onion. You've heard this before, I'm sure, some of you or most of you, asking open-ended questions and then following up. Sam mentioned it, getting underneath. What's the real issue? What else do we need to know? What about the schedule? How can we differentiate? Why customer, haven't you addressed this issue before if it's been such a problem for so long? Those types of questions help us peel back to where we become that trusted advisor. And a real quick example, and Sam, I'm going to ask you to join me on this, is this is overly simplified and just kind of a silly example, but an example of peeling back the onion. I'll just ask the question why. I'll be the salesperson, Sam, if you'll be the customer.
Sure.
But the stones in this building are deteriorating badly, and so it's a problem. And the customer, in this case, the government, wants to fix that problem. And so, as the capture manager, the seller, or whatever, I'm going to ask why, Sam. Why are the stones deteriorating?
Well, Brad, too many pigeons are leaving calling cards, and that's having an impact.
Oh, no. Okay. Now, if I don't peel the onion, I might start addressing that there's a pigeon problem and start doing some anti-pigeon campaign. But I'm going to peel it a little bit. And then, Sam, why are all the pigeons?
That's interesting, Brad. Probably because they feed on the heavy spider population.
Okay, maybe I need to get an insect company involved here. But I'm going to peel it more. Why are there so many spiders, Sam?
They're attracted by this huge moth population, Brad.
Oh, moths. Okay, why all the moths?
Well, they're attracted. The lights go up during the twilight swarming period, and all these moths arrive.
Ah, okay. So, okay, you get the idea. Maybe the solution is as simple for this particular problem. Let's suggest to them, and they pay a high consulting fee for this advice, but let's suggest turning on the lights 2 hours later. Or maybe it's a different type of light that doesn't attract moths. So you can see, just asking questions, peeling the onion. If we don't, scenarios like this can happen where the customer says, hey, we want a quality technology, a quality product. It's all about quality. Well, what in the heck does that mean? It could mean any of these things. And so peel the onion, asking those questions, clarify. This is how we build rapport that Amy talked about. This is how we gain trust. It's the questions we ask, believe it or not, it's the questions we ask, if they're good and they're smart, that build credibility and build trust. They prove to the customer we understand, we get it. Okay, so one of the takeaways we wanted to provide you as part of this webinar was a scorecard. So this is in your handout. You can print this out and use it. It's a lot of information to go over. We won't go in detail here on the webinar, but Sam, could you just explain the concept behind this strength of sale scorecard?
Sure, Brad. I want you to just imagine, those of you who are sales managers, those of us who have to do a pipeline review, we pick on a salesperson and we say, Heather, when's this deal going to come in? And Heather says, well, Sam, this is going to come in January. I'm a bit short on numbers. So Heather, see if somehow you can squeeze it this quarter. We're a bit short on numbers. And off Heather goes with a new task. Whereas what I should have done as the sales manager said, Heather, before we say it's January, let's look at a scientific way of saying how likely is it that we're going to close this deal. And the strength of sale check is across these 5 areas. Do we understand the customer's pain and we score it? Do we have access to the power in the decision makers? And do we know how to navigate our way with the power? Is there a vision of a solution that is linked to our solution? Is there value? Is there a business case or a value proposition which has been agreed and understood clearly? Have they collaborated with us? And finally, is there a compelling reason to act? And these questions, you answer them and you can score yourself. And if you noticed on the right-hand side, there are 2 dates, one where the scoring was done on October the 27th, and then one on November 15th. What this will do is, if I did this along with Heather, it tells us how likely are we, how confident are we that this sale will come through at this time. And maybe we've identified some gaps. For example, we haven't got access to power. There isn't a compelling reason to act. So we go and do some more work and then check and get another score. And this takes away the guesswork from when the deal will come. So it's a great tool for managers. It's a great tool for any one of us who's in sales to be able to apply some science behind saying, where are we in bringing this deal home? Back to you, Brad.
God, this is excellent, Sam. This is really good because you can track this over time. You can visually see the progress, and it's very similar to those of you that might be using a P-win calculator or probability of win calculator with some of these key similar points. The pain, the motivation, the value, the access to power. How have we influenced this? And keeping track of that, because boy, so often we just do exactly what Sam said. How's it coming along? Are we still on target to close on January 15th? It's not good enough. If we're truly managing our pipeline as we should be, we've got to have a mechanism. Thank you, Sam, for first providing that and sharing it and explaining that. So as we wrap up, and again, thank you for your time today and joining us. Just the things we've shared, some of us, we have to help overcome some of these sales myths. Sales is all of our responsibility to build the brand, build revenue, secure service customers, build trust and prospects within our customers, ask good questions, help as we go, as we shape the opportunity. We're trying to build a business case for our customer to choose us, to select us. Actively listen more than we talk, work toward becoming that trusted advisor, and most importantly, collaborate and really try to find solutions that the customer is after. And we've used up your hour, and so we've addressed many of your questions as we went, and thank you for submitting those. Thank you for joining us. Sam and Amy, any final words? Amy, anything you'd like to leave the group with?
No, but thank you so much for including me. I think this was great.
Good. Sam?
Put the fun back into selling and go sell more.
Awesome. Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. And we hope you'll join us. We'll be setting our calendar for our next series of webinars here in the next week or so, and hope you'll join us next year. We wish everyone a great holiday season and a new year coming up. And we thank you for, again, your time, your loyalty, and your trust in Shipley. Have a good rest of your day and take care.